So what if I want to write a single character to the file? Okay. Well, what I can do is I have a file that I've created that pretty much says here's a file full of text that ends with a colon. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and close that down so that I can write to it. Because remember, if I have it open in my in a different editor altogether, then as far as the computer is concerned, that file is open. So I definitely want to close the file before I try to do any work on the file with my own program. So I did that. So I want to open up the file. I'm going to write the letter C, and then I'm going to close the file. Let's see how it does. So we click on that. It finished with exit code 0. We open the file up and have a look at it, and sure enough, there's the letter C at the very end. So now we have a way in which we can append just a single character to the end of our file, which is kind of an important thing if we're going to do our little demonstration, right? So let me close that down. So now I'm going to adapt this to our pseudocode, right? So the first thing it says is we want to open grades for output as a new file. So Control C. We're going to open grades.txt because it's a text file, and we're going to call it new file. All right, so there's our output for the new file. And then down here, we'll do that so that it closes. And then after that, everything that goes on in the inside is exactly the same as what we have been doing all along, with some very minor differences. So let me go ahead and put all that code together for you, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so I did everything that we're used to doing. The criteria is that we would enter the student's name and enter the student's score. If the name was a 0 and the score was a 0, we would go ahead and jump ship on everything. All right, so I just set it as the name as being 0. Let's look at the pseudocode up here, and it says basically it's pretty much just doing everything that that's in the pseudocode. It will always take a student name, and it'll always take a 0. Now when I do write enter 0 for both when done, I suppose I could test for that, right? While not done here, when I'm doing the testing for the done equals true. If name is equal to 0, I could do and score is equal to 0 in that place, but I didn't bother to do that. All right. One of the drawbacks to this approach is we are forced to input the name and the score every time, even when we feel that we're done with everything, right? Because putting a 0 there, of course, means that we're pretty much done. But in this case, we are forced to put in both the name and the score, even if we're done. The solution, I think, is intuitively obvious. I'm going to leave it to you guys to figure out how one would make it so that the moment they put in a name of 0, then it won't ask for the score. All right. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy, I think, to reason out. We'll see how that is for you guys. But at any rate, here we are. While not done, get the name, get the score. If the name is 0, set done to true. If the name is not 0, we will write out the name, we will write out the file, or we will write out a comma and a space, and then we will write out the score. Okay, and then we will go back through the loop, and so this will continue until we finally enter a 0 for the name, and it doesn't matter what we enter for the score. If name is 0, it's going to stop. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this thing. Student's name, Dave, and we'll say that Dave's score was a 70, so he's got a low C. And we'll say Tom, and we'll say that Tom's score is an 80. He's a pretty sharp guy. And we'll say Julie, Julie, and we'll say that Julie's score is a 90. She's a pretty sharp girl. All right. And now it's asking for a third one. I'm not going to bother with the third one, so I'll hit enter. And it's asking for the score, of course. And I hit a 0 and enter, and it says that it finished. So, as luck would have it, we now have a grades.txt. So if I double click on that, you'll see that Dave is 70, Tom is 80, and Julie is 90, and they have little commas there to help us out. Now, if I want to, I can add another score, couldn't I? So how would you do that? I will leave it to you guys to figure out how you could modify this code so you could add another score. Okay, and I'll leave it to you guys to figure out how to read these. The key is read line. Now that we've done that, though, let me bring up another particular thing that I wanted to bring up about Python in terms of working with files. Okay, we played around with open, we played around with writing and reading. There's another way in which we can manage files, and that has to do with what's called the with statement. Okay, and this particular statement handles opening and closing and everything all in one big cool shot. Okay, so what I can do, let me go ahead and just erase all of this, and I will put in some text. I just happen to have an example over here. I think this example will work. Let's see, with open, and I'm going to say grades dot text as file. You see I have the file name, and that's similar to what we have up here, right? Open grades for output as new file. Here we're just simply opening grades as file. For line in grades, so it's going to grab a line, then we're going to print the line, and of course we have a syntax error, so let's fix that right now. Okay, and let's run it, see if it works. And there it is, Dave 70, Tom 80, Julie 90. I wonder if I can get rid of these extra lines. I think if I go comma end equals quote quote, let's run that and see what that looks like. Yeah, it fixed that. So why are we getting these huge line spaces? Well, the act of the print command produces a line feed, right? We know that from before. And it just so happens that our grade file also already has line feeds in it. So when I use just a plain old print, it picks up the line feed for print as well as the line feed that's at the end of the line. So by putting end equals quote quote, I get rid of the line feed that's at the end of the line. Okay, so hopefully this all makes sense to you. Please experiment around with this, build these files, because the final exam is going to require that you read and write Python text files using the read and write, just as I have demonstrated here, maybe with a little more flair to it. Any additional flair that I ask for, I will supply. Any, for example, if I want to encrypt something, I will give you the function that's responsible for doing the encryption. I will give you a nice block and a nice body of code that will completely exist except for the little piece of code that I will want you to write as part of the final. Now, last semester I did this and it worked out really, really well because people didn't have to take the time to remember, well, not only remember, but avoid making typing errors and that kind of stuff. It made it so much easier because they could concentrate on the one thing that I was really looking for. So on the final, you're going to be writing to a text file and you're going to be reading from a text file. And probably what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to have an encrypted text file. And you're going to read that encrypted text file one character at a time, and you're going to, I don't know if I'm going to have you write back the text file or if I'm just going to have you just enter with the messages on the final exam. I think I'll probably, I'll have you write the text file out because that way I know for sure you know what it is, right? So you'll read a text file in with open as, in this previous method that we use, Control Z, Z, Z. Now let's get back to where we were. There we go. Right now this is doing the write, but here it would be a read, right? Correct? So you would read in the file one character at a time. You would convert that character using the code that I will supply to you, and then write the character out to another file. So that means that you'll have here, this wouldn't be new file. In this case, this would be out file. Just like that. So if I double click on that, Control C, Control V, Control V, Control V, Control V, And so that handles all the output. And if I wanted to read a new file or an input file, I would say in file equals open the name of the file, comma, R for read. And then I would read my file and I would write it out. I'd read my character, I would write it out. I'd read my character, write it out, and so on and so forth. Okay? I feel confident that you'll be able to reason out how to do this, especially if you are faithful to listen to these videos, implement what I just did, and take the time to write out your own little experiment. Can you create a text file, read that text file, change the characters of the text file all to uppercase, and write it? Now, what about your assignment? With respect to your assignment, the only difference between your assignment and what I did here is you have 2 additional scores that you have to output. Okay? Don't forget to include some way to ensure that the user is entering numbers, numeric data, and not characters when we're talking about the score. That's going to be required. That's part of this this assignment. Okay, so hopefully you'll be up to speed. Everything will work out okay. With that, I'll say happy coding.